Welcome to the presentation on the Consolidated Application for the 2023 fiscal year, the 2022-23 school year. This presentation will take you on a walkthrough of the requirements for the Consolidated Applications in MEGS Plus and Nexus for the 2023 school year. First thing to be aware of is that the application will again this year be a two-part application. The Title I school selection components of the application will again be housed in Nexus, and any district that receives Title I Part A basic funds will need to complete that Nexus application. To access that application, users will go to the My Login for third-party access. Information about how to set up that access account and where to access that is in the resource document for the spring workshop. As a note, the Nexus portion of the application should be done prior to completing your budgets. You can wait to submit the Nexus portion until the MEGS Plus budgets are completely done, just to ensure that those applications fully align. For MEGS Plus, the budget components will be done in that application. That is currently not connected to the My Login for third party, so you'll access it through the MEGS Plus portal as you have done previously. The budgets in MEGS Plus must align to information that you have entered in Nexus for any districts that receive Title I Part A basic funds. Some of the key dates for the 2023 Consolidated Application are shown here on this slide. Currently, we're anticipating estimated allocations to be available during the month of May. We're also scheduled to go live with the Consolidated Applications in both Nexus and MEGS Plus during the month of May. The initial submission date to receive a July 1st obligation date of the application is July 1 of 2022. Applications submitted after that date will receive an obligation date that coincides with the date the applications are actually submitted. That submission must include both the Nexus and MEGS Plus application for any districts that receive Title I Part A basic funds. The deadline to submit the original consolidated applications is November 18. If a district fails to submit the original application by that date, they may be ineligible for funding during this grant cycle. Amendments can be initiated once applications receive the grant funds approval status. As a reminder, for districts that receive Title I Part A basic funds, you should initiate amendment of both your Nexus and your MEGS Plus applications. Typically, those amendments are started once final expenditure reports have been submitted and approved and final allocations are available. Final allocations will be available based on the date that the department receives information from the U.S. Department of Education. Typically, those allocations are available sometimes during the month of November. The final date to be aware of is April 29, which is the final date to submit any outstanding modifications on amended applications to close out the grant year. As I mentioned, the Title I school selection components of the application will be done again this year in the Nexus application. The Nexus landing page has features similar to MEGS Plus. To initiate the Title I school selection components of the Consolidated Application, find the Consolidated Application under the list in the My Opportunities window and click the application name. Then, on the pop-up that comes up, click to initiate the application. If you're an authorized user for multiple districts, you'll see a drop-down that you'll need to use to select which district you are initiating an application for before you can click the Initiate button. As a reminder, only Level 5 users have the ability to initiate or submit an application. Once an application has been initiated but not submitted, you can relocate the application in the My Tasks window. Be sure to click the application number, not the district name, to open up the application. If an application has been submitted or fully approved, use the search feature to find the application back if you need to reference it or initiate an amendment. Navigation within Nexus is by way of the side navigation bar rather than having to revisit a View Edit screen as you do in MEGS Plus. That side navigation bar has the ability to collapse and expand sections, which will vary based on application requirements. All status changes after initiating the application, which includes submission, modifications, and amendments, are done via the Status Options area, which is near the bottom of the menu bar. To add people to the application, use the Add Edit People link near the bottom section of the menu bar. Note that the individual you want to add must first be added as a user for the organization before they can be added to the application. Please see the instructions on the MDE Nexus website for additional details about adding users to an application or to the organization. The first section in the Con app is the Grant Management section. This section contains many standard screens such as the cover screen, general assurances, important information, and other similar screens. In addition, it has the following Review Grant Selection screen. On the Review Grant Selection screen, LEAs will see the available amounts for each grant that may be available to accept. They will then need to indicate how much of that total availability they will be accepting. LEAs are encouraged to accept the full availability at the time they initially apply, and may go back to the screen to make adjustments when the availability amounts changes if they wish to add the additional amounts to their application at that time. LEAs can also wait to make adjustments later on when they submit an amendment after the initial application has been approved. If Title I carryover exists, and if that carryover exceeds the 15% limit, and the LEA has not applied for a waiver, the carryover available will be lower than the total carryover. This may be a signal to an LEA to apply for the waiver if they are eligible. At amendment, LEAs should ensure that they accept the full availability of any carryover to avoid losing any funds. This year, there will also be a Do Not Apply option available for an LEA to signal that they will not be applying for any of the listed federal funds. LEAs must either accept some amount for the grant, indicate they will not be applying for the grant, or indicate that they will be applying later for the grant. If any accepted value is entered for a grant, Do Not Apply or Apply Later cannot be selected. In the Grant Management section, LEAs will need to identify upfront if they have private schools participating in Title I Part A. For other grants that are subject to equitable services, there is a similar screen in MEGS Plus where LEAs will indicate private school participation in those other grants. This screen will not display for PSAs or ISDs where the equitable services is not required. The next section in the Consolidated Application will gather information about the schools in the district. As before, LEAs will establish grade span groups to be used to identify eligible schools for Title I programs. The purpose of this screen is to establish distinct groupings for schools. If a district has a configuration of buildings that ends up with overlapping grade spans, for example, a K-8 building and a 7-8 building, the district will need to establish groupings that make sense for most buildings within their district. For example, in the case above, if most elementary buildings were K6 and only one was K8, the appropriate grouping could be K6 and 7-8, assuming that they had other 7-8 buildings in the district where most 7th and 8th grade students attended. Next, LEAs will be asked to identify the grade span group each school and their LEA will be assigned to, and provide student count information for those buildings. If the actual grade span of a school could fit one or more grade span groups, the LEA should select the group that most students in that building are part of. For example, if the available groups were K5 and 6-8, and there was a building that served K8, if most of the students in that building were in grades K5, the K5 grouping should be used. As before, fall count data will be preloaded. LEAs should ensure that data is entered for each school on the list. No school should have a student count of 0. If an LEA went through reconfiguration or opened new schools, they may need to adjust the student count numbers pre-entered to account for a different or new configuration. And will need to check one of the boxes at the top to identify why the data differs from the expected values. All other districts should stick with the values preloaded in the application. If an LEA has private schools participating in other non-Title I federal programs and needs to complete the Equitable Services worksheet, the numbers on this screen for total district enrollment should align with the Equitable Services worksheet. On the next screen, ranking methodology, LEAs with Title I programs and 1,000 or more students will need to make some choices about how their schools will be ranked. In the first step, the default of serving all schools with a poverty percentage of greater than 75% will be checked. This is required for such districts, and LEAs will not be able to deselect this option. LEAs will have the option to also rank high schools with greater than 50% low income above high schools with 75% or less low income, and include them in the first groups of schools to be served. The second decision for LEAs with greater than 1,000 students will be deciding if they want to group and sort remaining school district wide or by individual grade spans. If the LEA chooses grade span grouping, they will then have the ability to decide which value will be used to determine eligibility, the district-wide percent low income or the percent low income for the grade span. This can be set differently for each grade span. The option to indicate that a grade span will not be served has been removed from this screen for next year. If an LEA does not wish to serve schools in a given grade span, they will just not assign a program type for those schools on the following screen. The last decision an LEA will make on this screen is not about grouping, but about eligibility. In step 3, the LEA can choose to make any school Title I eligible that has at least 35% of the students from low-income families, even if the percent poverty for that school is not above the district-wide or grade span percent poverty. This option will maximize the number of schools which may be eligible for Title I program in the district. If a district has less than 1,000 students, they will not be presented any of the options just discussed. The district will simply need to save this screen as all schools will be Title I eligible, and there is no requirement to serve them in any rank order. The next screen, Title I eligible schools, will list all schools in the LEA, and the schools will be grouped and sorted based on the information provided on prior screens. If a district is required to serve schools in rank order and wishes to skip over funding a higher ranked school with title funds so they can serve a lower ranked school, the LEA will still need to select the Title I program type that will be provided in that school using the Section 31A funds and then check the skipped box. Skip schools can now be designated as either targeted or school-wide. This will allow skip schools to provide Title I-like services that are either targeted or school-wide if the school has transitioned to school-wide and been approved to operate as such. Only those schools that have been approved to operate as school-wide should be indicated as school-wide. As a reminder, all Title I schools, including skip schools, should be completing the school-wide and targeted program description template. While they do not need to submit those templates anywhere, they should retain a copy locally and ensure that the program description is shared with parents of children in their school. As before, if a school was eligible and served last year, but not eligible this year, no program type needs to be identified. See Besser Elementary. To serve a school that was eligible and served the prior year, but is not eligible this year, previously referred to as grandfathered, see Hinks Elementary, the LEA must choose a program type for the school rather than check a box to grandfather it. Please be aware that this is a one-year extension of eligibility. Such schools will not be eligible to be served a second year if they do not end up fully eligible again next year. If an LEA does not wish to serve an eligible school at the bottom of the rank order, the LEA will leave the program type blank. See Thunder Bay Junior High. If an LEA has private schools participating in Title I, the next screen they will come to will gather information about those schools. For Title I Part A only, private school data, counts, and participation will be added within the application. An external worksheet will not be needed. LEAs will add or delete rows as needed to list all participating private schools in Title I Part A. The next section in the application will require districts to make decisions about transfers between funds. Since carryover from the amounts originally allocated to provide services to private schools is not eligible for transfer, this section will also gather information about any such carryover, if applicable. On the first screen of this section, LEAs will be required to identify upfront any planned fund transfers from their current year allocations. If adjustments need to be made to transferred amounts later on during the budgeting process, the LEA will need to return to this screen to adjust the planned transfers. If an LEA will be taking indirect on the transferred funds, the amount of indirect planned to be taken on those funds should be included here as part of the transfer. For example, if an LEA wanted to transfer $10,000 from Title II to provide Title I services and has an indirect rate of 5% that they plan to apply, they should indicate a total transfer of $10,500, $10,000 for the services and $500 for the indirect on those services on this screen. The indirect will be subtracted back out on the Title I reservation screen. If an LEA is eligible for SRSA funds direct from the U.S. Department of Education and wants to utilize the additional flexibility to spend Title II or Title IV funds like Title I, Title II, Title III, or Title IV, that flexible use is not considered a transfer, and the funds used flexibly would not be identified on this screen. Next, if an LEA is applying for carryover and has participating private schools, they will be required to identify if any of the carryover needs to be allocated back to the private school. If the full amount of carryover attributed to private schools, the function code 371 from the final expenditure report, is not reallocated to private schools, LEAs will need to enter a justification to explain why the private schools are declining the carryover funds. Recapture of funds originally budgeted to provide equitable services is only permitted when all eligible private schools have declined additional services which would utilize the full value of the funding. This decline of additional services can be either in writing or demonstrated by way of a failure to meet reasonable and well-communicated deadlines for communicating to the public schools a desired service plan with the LEA. From the remaining carryover funds, after accounting for any equitable services amounts on the prior screen, LEAs will then be required to identify upfront any planned fund transfers. As a reminder again, any funds used under SRSA Flex are not considered a transfer, and if changes are made to transfer decisions later on during the budgeting process, districts will need to return to the transfer screens to make adjustments. The next section, LEAs will make decisions about how Title I funds will be distributed to different schools. LEAs with participating private schools in Title I Part A will use this screen to identify any amounts from the amount calculated to provide equitable services for private schools that will be used for indirect or direct administrative costs associated with provision of those equitable services. If an LEA indicates a portion of those funds reserved to provide equitable services will be reserved to cover indirect costs, that amount will be added to the amount reserved for indirect reserved on the next screen to align with the amount actually reserved on the budget summary screen for Title I Part A. In other words, any amount you enter on this screen for negotiated indirect needs to be added to the amount indicated on the following screen for indirect on Title I to get the total indirect that you'll be budgeting in your MEGS Plus consolidated application. The next screen looks at all the different reservations that can occur from the Title I Part A funds. Like last year, you'll need to enter information about those various optional and required reservations on this screen. If parent engagement reservation is required, the minimum amount will be calculated and entered automatically, with the assumption that that full amount will be utilized at the building level. LEAs will only need to enter data in this section if they want to increase the reservation amount or if they want to utilize a piece of that reservation at the district level. All LEAs will be required to reserve some amount for students experiencing homelessness. The homeless liaison amount will now be included as part of this reservation amount rather than as an administrative reservation. New this year, there will also be a line to separate out any reserved amount to provide for students experiencing foster care. This is not a required reservation, but optional for districts based on their locally identified needs. LEAs with Title I Part A neglected facilities will have the ability to reserve additional Title I funds to add to the funds already identified to support Title I neglected facilities. Indirect costs will continue to be separated from direct admin costs. All indirect costs identified here will be attributed back to the fund source if transfers are involved. The max indirect shown assumes no capital outlay or flow-through type of budget items will be created. If an LEA takes the full indirect but then budgets such costs in their budget, they may need to return to the screen to reduce the indirect amount since those type of expenses are not eligible for indirect. The bottom section of the reservation screen covers carryover distributions and reservations. Like last year, LEAs will need to enter information about various optional and required reservations from Title I carryover. The base assumption will be that all carryover will go back to be distributed to schools on a per pupil basis. LEAs will only need to enter information in this section of the screen if carryover is to be used for other reservations or is required to be returned to parent engagement activities. If the LEA did not expend the funds they were required to reserve for parental engagement activities in the prior year, those unspent funds would be indicated on the top line. If a portion of those unspent funds will be retained at the district, that amount is indicated in the second line. Otherwise, it is assumed that the remainder of the funds will be distributed to schools. If an LEA wants to direct more resources to parental engagement at the district level than the maximum 10% of the reservation on new funds, they can only do so from carryover by indicating those additional reserved amounts on the applicable row in the table. Federal law requires that from the amount reserved for parent and family engagement from new allocations, no more than 10% can be used for district level activities. If an LEA had Title I Part A neglected facilities with carryover, the amount of that carryover should also be entered on this screen. At the bottom of the reservation screen is a summary that will help an LEA know how much to budget for types of costs. All district level costs, direct admin, homeless reservation, foster care reservation, and district parental engagement must be budgeted in the Title I budget and not in a transfer budget. All school level parental engagement costs should also be budgeted in the Title I budget and not transfer budgets. This is to help ensure that required minimum amounts are being spent in this area and to aid in federal reporting requirements related to spending on parent and family engagement. As a reminder, the amount of indirect shown in the summary table only includes indirect taken on public services from Title I funds. LEAs must add to that any amount of indirect taken on private school Title I services to get the total value to budget for indirect in the Title I Part A budget summary in MEGS Plus. If indirect is being taken on funds transferred into Title I Part A, the amounts listed in the two reservation tables above for a grant source must be added together along with any indirect that may be taken on funds not transferred from that grant source to get the total indirect to budget for that grant source. For example, if an LEA took $100 in indirect on new Title II funds transferred into Title I, and $100 indirect on carryover funds transferred into Title I, and another $500 indirect on Title II funds not transferred, the total indirect budget on the Title II budget summary screen would be $700. It is critical that the values reserved on this screen for various costs align with the amounts actually budgeted in your MEGS Plus application. Otherwise, approval of applications may be delayed as additional modifications will be required to bring the budget in alignment. The next screen is the allocation to school attendance areas. This screen will show the grouping for the schools to aid in distribution decisions. There are added error checks to ensure LEAs do not allocate 31A funds unless required. Allocating them when not needed creates added work for the LEA to create additional budgets. Section 31A funds should only be allocated when needed to meet minimum funding levels for a school. Finally, there is an assurance to clarify that 31A allocated must be supplemental to funds the school otherwise would have received if they had not been Title I eligible school. LEAs will be required to create detailed 31A budgets for any 31A funds allocated on this screen to provide a Title I-like program in a school. Those budgets tentatively will need to be completed in Nexus. Although to ensure a timely launch of the application, this year LEAs may be asked to provide that budget information by way of an upload within the Nexus application using an Excel file rather than completing those budgets in Nexus itself. A new screen for this year is the school level budget screen. If an LEA is transferring funds into Title I, this screen will be used to show where the funds will come from to support each school's Title I budget. LEAs who are not transferring any funds will simply need to save this screen. The information on the screen should align with the actual budgets in MEGS Plus. For example, if an LEA indicates here that $20,000 of a school's Title I program will be funded from a transfer from Title II, the Title II budget in MEGS Plus should include a school-level budget for that school with $20,000 worth of expenses budgeted in it. While work is underway to allow LEAs to create budgets in Nexus for any Section 31A funds they had designated would be used to meet minimum funding requirements to provide a Title I-like program in a Title I eligible building, the full functionality for this has not been finalized. If the vendor is unable to deliver a fully functioning application in time for a timely launch, the Section 31A Title I-like program budget will need to be submitted via an upload of a budget spreadsheet on the Section 31A Title I-like programs attachment screen, rather than using the process outlined on the next several slides. Note that these sections will only show up if an LEA has allocated Section 31A funds to a school on the allocation to school screen. Only LEAs that are using Section 31A funds to replace required amount of Title I funds for a Title I eligible building will need to submit Section 31A budgets for pre-approval. Other LEAs who may be using Section 31A funds in a Title I building to enhance or braid with the Title I funded programming are not required to submit Section 31A budgets. The first step in creating budgets for schools that will have all or a portion of their Title I program funding provided via Section 31A funds is to go back to the Grant Management section of the application and click on the Add Edit Grant Members Budget button. Here, an LEA will need to choose the building search using the Type drop-down. The user will then need to enter an agreement number or building name in the search box and then click Search. Note that the results display is limited to 10 rows, so common building names such as Lincoln Elementary may not show the building that actually belongs to your particular LEA in the results. For that reason, it is recommended to search based on agreement number rather than building name. After the LEA searches, entities that match the search will be visible in the results pane. To create a budget for an entity, the user will then need to click the plus icon next to the entity name. A pop-up window will then open where the LEA will see a drop-down that is pre-populated with Section 31A Title I-like program budget option. The LEA will then click Save to create a school level budget for that entity. Once a school level budget has been created, it will show up in the Buildings pane. If a school level budget for a grant source is no longer needed, the LEA can click the trash can icon next to the building name to delete that budget. Note that the delete option is only available if the building level budget is 0. If items have been budgeted for that building, the user will first need to delete those items before deleting the budget on this screen. Once a school level budget has been created for a building on the Add Edit Grant Member screen, the LEA can then visit the Section 31 Title I Like Programs section of the application to access that budget and create line items within that budget. To see grant member budgets, first click on the Grant Member Budget button on the side menu. This will expand the menu bar with a list of all the schools who have school level budgets created on the Add Edit Grant Member screen. Clicking the name of the school will take the user to a budget summary screen for the school. To see a list of the individual budget items that make up the school budget, click the down arrow to the right of the school name. This will expand the list of budget items. To collapse that list, click the arrow again. If the school does not yet have any budget items, the list will simply show an item named Budget Items. Note that the exclamation icon will show you where errors may exist. As you expand down to the individual budget item level, you will be able to see where the specific issue resides. To create a new budget item in a budget with existing budget items, the user will first need to click an existing budget item and then click Add at the top of the budget item screen. Otherwise, they will be editing the existing budget item. If no budget items have been added to a school budget, clicking the Budget Items link under the school level budget will open a blank budget items screen. The Add Budget Item screen will have several fields to complete as shown in the screen clip. The first field, Budget Item Type, will be pre-populated as a Title I school program cost, and LEAs will not have to make any adjustment to that field. Next, although not clearly shown in this image, as development is still in progress, is a strategy field. Here, an LEA will have the ability to select a strategy from their MyKit plan to tie a budget item to. If the LEA does not currently have a strategy in MyKit that aligns with the budget item type, they will be able to enter a strategy in the strategy name text box. Note that any strategy selected with the strategy dropdown will overwrite anything entered in the strategy name text box when the budget item is saved, and this strategy field will be blanked out. A strategy will be required for every budget item. The next fields are the activity and the description fields. If an LEA selected a strategy from the MyKit plan, they will be able to then select an activity associated with that strategy in the activity field. The LEA would then save the budget item so that the activity information can pre-populate the description field. The LEA will then be able to add additional information to the description as needed to fully support the item as reasonable, necessary, and allocable. If the LEA does not currently have an activity in their MyKit plan that aligns with a planned expense, they can simply skip the activity step and just enter the description manually. Note that on final save, the activity field will be blanked out again, and the information will not overwrite the description if any text has already been entered in the description field. The remaining fields, function code, salaries, benefits, purchase services, supplies and materials, capital outlay, other, FTE and hours, will all function in the same way they do within MEGS Plus. While this presentation will not fully walk through the MEGS Plus application, as there have not been any significant changes to that application, there are a few key notes that we want to identify from MEGS Plus. First, for any LEA that receives Title I basic funds, they should complete the Nexus application, the TIS components, first. It is recommended to wait to submit the Nexus application until the budgets in MEGS Plus are also done, in case any adjustment needs to be made. LEAs must ensure alignment between the budgets in MEGS Plus and the identified accepted funds, transfers, reservations, and school-level budget amounts in Nexus, or the approval of their applications will be delayed as modifications will need to be made. One change in the application is that LEAs will no longer have to identify the activity type for Title IV budget requests, only the primary use of funds. Another change that was put in place last year is that there is a new primary use of funds option for SRSA eligible districts to use SRSA Flex rather than transfers in Title II and Title IV to gain additional flexibility in how the funds can be used. Finally, as a reminder for districts with participating private schools, the Nexus application will calculate equitable services amounts for Title I only. All other programs with participating private schools will need to use the Equitable Services Estimation Worksheet to determine the appropriate amounts available for services and upload that worksheet into the MEGS Plus application. At this time, we'll pause the spring workshop presentations to allow for any additional questions that individuals may have. Also want to remind you that there is a resource document that goes with the spring workshop presentation that has some additional links to helpful resources to guide you through completion of the Consolidated Application. And you can follow the Consolidated Application Important Information link under Tools and Resources on the OFS website at www.mi.gov/OFS.